Though we roam the seas, far from all we love, we will drink to the good times and this land we fight to defend.
Welcome to this episode of A History of the Navy in 100 Objects, presented by the United States Naval Academy Museum. Today, we are looking past the museum, past the Naval Academy, and even past this Earth. Today's object is a model of the Saturn V rocket, signed by 8 astronauts that were launched into space aboard this rocket. The Saturn V rocket was developed to support the Apollo space program in the 1960s. It successfully completed 13 missions and was the system that delivered U.S. astronauts to the moon in 1969. We are joined today by Mr. Don Pruill, the curator of ship models at the museum, for more details.
What's very unique about this particular model is the fact that I have gathered over the years 8 autographs of Apollo astronauts. Now, why is this important to us as far as the Saturn V? Because it's part of the Apollo program, part of the original space program that John F. Kennedy back in 1961 said, look, I want somebody to be safely sent to the moon and then safely brought back home.
The Saturn rocket was developed after the original Redstone rocket and Gemini rocket, after which NASA worked to develop docking capability. This led to the Apollo docking into the Lunar Excursion Model, or LEM, on its way to the moon. Notably, there were 8 Naval Academy alumni in the Apollo program, of which 3 walked on the moon. Alan Shepard, James Irwin, and Charles Duke took their place in history as those men who walked on the moon.
This particular rocket stands 363 feet tall. It's a huge rocket. It's like 150 feet taller than the Statue of Liberty and actually weighs 13 times more than the Statue of Liberty. This particular rocket carried almost 1 million pounds of fuel, which is almost unbelievable in itself, and the weight of this to project this into space. I mean, it's an incredible journey. It took 4 days to actually get to the moon. Our first landing was on July 20th, 1969.
They stayed on the surface of the moon for about 2 hours before getting back into their LEM and launching back to join up with the Apollo spacecraft. The successes of the Apollo program led into the development of the shuttle program. The U.S. Naval Academy boasts 53 graduates that went on to become NASA astronauts. Among those, 2 alumni have lost their lives: Michael Smith in the Challenger accident and Willie McCool on the Columbia. The U.S. Naval Academy has more graduates in the space program than any other service academy, many of whom are celebrated in this museum exhibit.
What's pretty unique about this particular one, as we started off with, was the autographs. I have 8 autographs on this particular rocket, 2 of them of which are Academy alumni, which would be Jim Lovell and Bill Aldrin. But there's also Willie Smith was on here, Bill Smith, along with Gene Cernan, who was in Apollo 17 together, and they were the last ones to leave the surface of the Earth. I also have, and was honored to be able to meet and talk with Neil Armstrong. His signature is right there on the second stage, and right next to it is Gene Cernan. So it's kind of unique, the fact that we have not only the first man that stepped onto the face, on the face of the moon, but also the last man to leave the surface of the moon.
Thank you for taking the time to learn with us today. Come out to the U.S. Naval Academy Museum to see this piece of history for yourself.